Apologize. Okay, good morning. We are learning Lila Nishmas Mendel, Mariam Bas Kalman Reuven, and Hashem Shavan Aliyah. We're up to Nun Amud Aleph, and we are up to Tana Rabba Barachana Kameda Rav. Yeah, you see that? That's probably 10 lines down. It's the second to last word on the line. The art scroll, it's the 58-1, second column, top of the column. See that? Tana Rabba Barachana? Yeah? Okay, so we've been discussing laws of mukta, and the idea is like this. There are things which are intrinsically mukta, and the question is, how do you change its status into things which are non-mukta? Okay, so you have things which are non-mukta to begin with, like a book. A book is non-mukta, but you have things which are like rocks or twigs that are going to be used for firewood, or the credit card that you're getting, or the swipe card that you're going to use for the hotel. You know, these are all things which are mukta, and you want to go ahead and use these things for Shabbos. What do you have to do to break them from their mukta status that you could use them on Shabbos? You can't on Shabbos wake up and say, oh, I want to use it. It's already mukta. So how do you go ahead and, what is needed to go ahead and break it from its status of mukta? That's what the Gemara is going to be discussing primarily for the next little bit. So Tana Rabba Barbachana Kamei Rav. Chario Shodekel Shegadron Eitzim. If you have branches of date palms that were ultimately supposed to be for firewood, okay? So firewood, obviously you can't make a fire on Shabbos. So they're set aside, they're sitting next to your fireplace on Shabbos, sitting outside next to your fire pit. They're obviously mukta. V'nimlach alem lishiva. But then you change your mind. You said, I want to sit on these branches. So tarach l'kasher. You have to go ahead and tie them together. That's how you would make it into a chair. You would like string them together so that they stay together. That's what you have to do. So according to the first opinion, you would need an actual action. You'd have to do something to the wood in order to make it non-muktzah.
Make it that you couldn't use it for that other purpose.
Well, it could still theoretically be used for that purpose, but yeah, it's clearly designated. It's like a physical action demonstrating that it's going to be used for a non-muktzah thing. You don't have to tie it, but you have to intend. Of course, you have to think about it before Shabbos. So one says you have to do an action before Shabbos to demonstrate that it's not being used for firewood. The other one says you have to have intention before Shabbos in order to make it not for firewood. Hu tanila, vu amrla. Okay, so Rabbi Rechana taught this brisa, and then he added something to it. And what is that? What did he add? Halacha B'Shem Gamliel. He says halacha is like B'Shem Gamliel, that you do not need to do an action. You need to think about it. Again, so let's say so whatever. So basically, again, you have wood, and wood is typically going to be muktzah for Shabbos, but you want to use this wood for something non-muktzah item. The halacha is that you need to think about it, and that would be sufficient to go ahead and to break it out of its muktzah status. Then you could use it on Shabbos. Okay, if you don't think about it, you just decide on Shabbos, that's not enough. But if you think about it, that's okay. Okay, Itmar, we're going to see a same type of machlokas. Rav Amar Kosher. Rav says in order to take these branches out of the muktzah status, you have to tie them into bundles. Shmuel Amar Choshev. Shmuel says all you have to do is think about it. Okay, that you have to think about the fact that you plan on sitting these things. And then now we have a new opinion. Rav Asi Amar Yoshev. Af bish lo kisher, v'af bish lo chishev. Rav Asi says, as long as you sat on it before Shabbos, even though you didn't tie it together, and even though you didn't necessarily have explicit intent to sit on Shabbos, as long as you sat on it, that demonstrated that you're using it for another purpose, that's okay. So now we have three opinions. One opinion says you have to do an actual action. One before Shabbos to make it into a non-firewood thing. The other says you have to think about it. I'm going to be using this on Shabbos. Other opinion says I don't have to think about I'm using it for Shabbos. As long as I sat on it before Shabbos, that demonstrates that I'm using it for non-muktzah items, and therefore, even if I didn't think I'm going to use it on Shabbos, that's enough. That's enough, okay? So Bishlama Rav, so again, just for example, in other words, just using this credit card example, the card, I don't know why whatever, that's the example that comes to my mind. So one would say you have to actually go ahead and manipulate it in some way. One would say you have to think about it, and one would say as long as you used it once for something other than the muktzah purpose, that's enough, even if you didn't have... even if you didn't have an explicit intention to use it on Shabbos. Okay? Those are the three opinions. Okay? Bishlam Rav Hudamar Katanakama. So Rav holds now Rav, Shmuel, and Rav Asi are Amoraim. They are coming from the later generation, and we want to assume they're going to be aligned with Tanaim of the earlier generation. So Bishlam Rav Hudamar Katanakama. Rav holds like the Tanakama. That makes sense. The Tanakama was the one who said they have to do an action. With Shmuel Nami Hudam Rabbi Gamliel. And Shmuel who said you just have to think, he goes like Rabbi Gamliel who says you have to think. El Rav Asi Damar Kaman. Who does Rav Asi? Again, an Amora can't go ahead and make up his own opinion. It has to be aligned with those of the earlier generation. Who does he hold like? So Huda Amar Ki Haitana. The Gemara says, yeah, he doesn't hold like the brisa that we had quoted above, but rather he holds like the following brisa, which we have not yet learned, and that is like this. The Tanya we learned, Yotzin Bifakorein Uvitzipa. A person's allowed to go out with combed flax or combed wool applied to a wound. Okay, Bisman Shetziva. So we're talking about over here a case where there's no Erev. Now typically there's no Erev, you can't carry. right? But in certain scenarios where a person is going to have something which is used for medical purposes, like kind of like a cast, then it's not going to be considered carrying, okay? But we're going to see some qualifications in terms of when it's considered like a full-fledged cast or a full-fledged bandage, okay? So the Gemara says, typically a person is allowed to go out with combed flax or combed wool on a wound, as long as they were dipped into oil and wrapped around with a string. In other words, it has to be a proper bandage. You can't just put throw a cotton ball. It has to be like immersed in oil, and therefore it's going to, by immersing it in oil, it makes sure that it's not going to hurt the person as they're walking, and tying it, make sure that it stays. It has to be something which is like a proper bandage. A person did not dip it in oil, did not wrap it around with a string, and you can't go out with it. But here's the key line. But if a person went out, even if they didn't dip it in oil, and even if they didn't wrap it around with a string, but if they went out before Shabbos a little bit, right, they did the action, even though you didn't dip it in oil, even though you didn't wrap it around, you're allowed to go out. That is identical or similar to the view of Rav Asi was the one who said by muksa, as long as you sat on it, that's enough. Even if I didn't have an explicit intention, that demonstrates that I plan on using it later. Similarly over here too, really a bandage to be a bandage has to be a proper bandage, it has to be dipped in oil, it has to be wrapped around, and so if I don't do that, typically I shouldn't be able to go out on Shabbos. It's not enough. Says this brisa, if I walked out before Shabbos without dipping in oil, without putting a string, I just had the pizza cloth, and I did a little bit before Shabbos, that's enough of an action that demonstrates that I want to continue doing it on Shabbos, and therefore I'm allowed to do it in terms of carrying, and that same principle is the one we're using for muksa, right? It's the same principle, one's by muksa, one's by carrying, but it's the same idea. Doing something like going ahead and using this item before Shabbos in a way, in some way, is enough of an action to demonstrate that I'm taking it out of its one status and moving into another status, whether for carrying or whether for muksa. Yes, Max?
It seems like that is specific for that purpose that you're using it, though, right? You're using it for the purpose of having that bandage attached before, and so you can continue to do the same action. Mm-hmm. Where in the case of before, we said that the sitting, you'd have to actually have used it the exact same way.
In both cases, I'm doing it the same way.
It's the same way, so it's not some sort of. You may have said before that as long as it's some sort of other use besides, as long as you've done it before or something. Yeah,
well, I think once you take it out of the status of muksa, you would be allowed. They're not talking about that case, but I don't think halachically there shouldn't be a difference. In other words, once I go ahead and use this, the straw or the wood for a non-muksa purpose beforehand, Rav Asi would say it's no longer muksa. Once it's no longer muksa, I can now go and come up with a third option of some, like not firewood, not that, something else. Because once it's non-muksa, meaning this is not muksa. Once it's non-muksa, I could go ahead and use it for a book, or imagine it was a book, not a sefer. I could use it for something else. Once it's non-muksa, now it's a non-muksa category. Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi brings another support for Rav Asi. Again, Rav Asi is the one who said you don't need to do an action, you don't need to have explicit thought, as long as you do something to it. What is that? Hakash al gamei mitzvah. Let's say you have straw on a bed. Okay, straw typically in the ancient world is used for firewood. However, straw could also be used for stuffing for a bed. You want to use, you basically use it. People would sleep on straw. Okay, so lo yinanu biyado. You have straw on the area where you're sleeping. You're not allowed to move it with your hand. Why? Because it is muksa. It's typically used for burning. Aval menanu begufo. You're allowed to move it around with your body, right? So let's say you have a pile of straw on your bed. It typically is used for firewood, but I want to sleep on it, so I can't move it with my hand and make it all smooth. What I could do is use my body and kind of wiggle it to make it comfortable. Okay, fine. Aval. Where the over here it's it's that I'm doing a klachar yad. I'm not doing but similar to shina. Yeah. Let's say the straw was designated for animals. Okay, if I designate for animals, that's not muksa. I have to feed my animals on Shabbos. Or before Shabbos, I already placed a sheet on it. If I placed a sheet on it, then I'm demonstrating. Then that's an action that is being that demonstrates I'm using it for a bed, right? Menana biyado. I'm allowed to then move it with my hand. Shema mina. Same idea. You hear from here, same thing. Even though I didn't explicitly intend to use it on Shabbos, but by covering it with a sheet, right, that's enough of an action before Shabbos to take it out of muksa. That's like Rav Asi who said, as long as I sit on the wood, I've taken it out of muksa, right? So basically you have this new threshold. Again, opinion number one is I have to do an action to it. Opinion number two is I have to think l'shem using it for Shabbos. Opinion number three, Rav Asi, which we're seeing over here again, is as long as I do an action, even if it's not an explicit thinking I'm going to use it on Shabbos, that action is enough to take it out of muksa, and now I can use it on Shabbos as well. Okay? Uman Tana de Paliga of Shem Gamliel. Now the Gemara goes back. There was the Tana Kama who said I have to do an action to the items. Who is the one who holds that? Who's the one who holds I have to do an action to the items? It's not enough that I think about it. It's not enough that I do it, that I sit on it, but I actually have to like tie it up together, right? Again, the Tanna Kama was the one who said I have to tie it up together. The Gemara says Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva, the one who holds this that I have to do that tie the wood together is Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva. How do we know that? Dechi asa Rav Dimi Amar Ziri Amar Rav Chanina. Rav Dimi said in the name of Ziri, said in the name of Chanina. Pam achas halach Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva lamakom echad. Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva once went to a place. Umatza charyo shel dekel shegadrim l'shem eitzim. And he found branches of date palms that were harvested for the sake of firewood. Okay, so they are totally muksa. Va'amar lahem l'talmidav, and he said to his students, right, so this is Friday. He comes to this place. We're gonna be staying in this vicinity for Shabbos. And he sees wood over here all tied up and designated next to the fireplace. But he's thinking, tomorrow I want to give shir. And I need a place for you guys to sit. So he sees this firewood. What does he say to them? Amar lahem l'talmidav, he says to the students, go and intend to sit on this wood. Okay, so wait, who's this opinion go like? This sounds like the opinion of not like the Tanna Kama. It sounds like the more lenient opinion. But let's see. But here's the key line. Zeiri added, and I didn't know whether they were going to visit mourners or they were going because they were going to a wedding in that story. Okay, so basically, Rav Zeiri adds a little bit to the story. He says, "By the way, I'm not sure. I knew it was a party. I knew it was a gathering they were going to. Whether it was a house of mourning or whether it was a wedding, they were going to something like that. And that's the key line of the story. Okay, the fact that Zeiri had to add, I didn't know whether it was a house of celebration, like a wedding, or a house of mourning. That means dafka beisa evil beisa mishad shridi. It means specifically in that case where they were going to some gathering, whether it was a wedding they were going to, or they were going to visit someone who's in mourning. That's what, because they were very busy. That's why he said, just think about it, implying aval hacha. But in a regular case, kasher in, lo kasher lo. It's only there. You have to go ahead and tie it. In other words, the storyline over there, what we're seeing is specifically because they were busy. That's why he said, just think about it. Just go and say, I am going to be sitting on these pieces of wood. Implying if it wasn't a busy time, I'd actually have to go and tie them together. Now, so that's the implication. Now, I would just add, the way the Rishonim understand this is as follows. It's not, usually we don't say like, oh, if I'm busy, I don't have to do it. In other words, let's say, if I'm busy, I don't have to cook something a third of the way before Shabbos, do whatever I want. If I'm busy, I didn't turn my lights on before Shabbos, I turn them on Shabbos. What does that mean if I'm busy? That's not a reason to do something which is muksa. What's going on? The explanation is as follows. The reason we normally say thinking is not enough is because if I really wanted to sit on it, I would have done something more substantial to sit on it, right? In other words, that's the svar. The svar behind the most stringent view is to say that if I have a muksa item, I can't just say, oh, I was planning on using it on Shabbos. If you're really planning on using it for Shabbos, you should have done something to it which would demonstrate it. The fact that you didn't is a proof that you actually were not planning on using it for Shabbos. What's the one exception to this? In a scenario when I'm very busy, then it's not a proof that I wasn't planning on using it for Shabbos. We'd say, the reason the person didn't go ahead and do something to the item was because they were very busy, right? So again, to review, Rav Chanina ben Akiva is telling his students, go ahead and do something to the item. Because as you go ahead and think about the item, and specifically we're talking about a case where it's very busy. And therefore, there specifically when it's very busy, then we'd say thought alone. The fact that Zeiri had to add that Rav Chanina ben Akiva only said this because they're in a very busy scenario, implying if you were not in a busy scenario, then you would actually have to do an action to it. And now we found who the author is of the first opinion, the opinion who said that you have to go ahead and do an action to it. So again, we have the opinion of Chanina ben Akiva, who says that if there's a muksa item, let's say wood, I actually have to tie the wood together if I want to use it on Shabbos. We have the opinion of Shimon Gamliel, who says all I have to do is think about it. And we have the opinion of Rav Asi, who says that as long as a person acted on it, did something to it, sat on it before Shabbos, that is sufficient. Okay? Fine. Another related ruling. Amrav Yehuda, machnes adam lo kupaso afar v'osava kol tzarko. A person is allowed to take a basket full of earth into their house before Shabbos and use it for all their needs. Why, you and I don't take basketfuls of earth into our house. If you put them into my house, someone would lose their minds, right? So, of course, understandably, right? What's going on, right? But back in the day, their floors, keep in mind, they didn't have carpets and they didn't have wood floors. They had dirt floors. And what would happen is people also they'd have phlegm and they were spitting their phlegm everywhere. Much more common back in the day. So what would you do? Someone would spit their phlegm. You take some earth, you throw it on the phlegm, and someone would go ahead and they take some earth, they throw it on the thing. So you're allowed to, people have these baskets of dirt. You're allowed to bring in dirt is typically muksa. but you're allowed to bring it. So the Mishnah says, bring it in before Shabbos, and you can use it on Shabbos. Darash Marzutra Mishmein Marzutra Rabba. Marzutra said in the name of Marzutra Rabba. You have to place it in a corner. You can't just have it like not just earth that's anywhere, but it has to be like really designated for this purpose. You have to put it in the corner. Who does this opinion go like? Or like Rav Shimon Gamliel, who says intention is enough. If this is going like the first opinion, like Chanina ben Akiva, you'd have to actually do more. You'd have to actually do an action to it, right? In other words, the fact he says just put in the corner, that means that all you're doing is thinking about it, right? According to putting in the corner is not.
It is an action.
It's an action. But it is, but it's not considered like a real action. Just like placing it somewhere, meaning as opposed to just pulling earth from the floor, that's like there's nothing there, right? The point is that so the implication is that that an action is not necessary. Amr Rapapa says no. Afilu tema Rabbanan. Really, this view could even go like the Rabbanan. Ad kalam Rabbanan to be a Maisa. When did the Rabbanan say you need to do an action? Elamidid baravidim be Maisa. It's only something like wood, where you could go ahead and attach it, you could do an action to it. But something which you can't do an action to, that would not apply. In other words, earth, by wood, you could do an action, therefore you must do an action. But earth, what do you do? Like there, you have to attach the wood. But over here, by earth, what do you do to it? There's nothing to do to it. And therefore, even the Rabbanan would agree that all you need is intention. Neima tonight. Now the Gemara says maybe this discussion really goes back to a machlokas of Tanaim, of an earlier generation. Okay, why? We have the following brisa. When a person's allowed to rub utensils with any substance to shine them on Shabbos. Interesting. You could shine items on Shabbos. You can't clean items on Shabbos. We're going to get to that. People probably probably up there at Borer. People are violated all the time about cleaning their clothes off. They take rub things off. We'll get there. But here you have silver. You're allowed to rub it with any substance. Except silver utensils with tartar, okay? Hanesser b'chol mutter. But you're allowed to use not tartar, and you're allowed to use niter and sand, okay? They do not smooth the silver. Tartar, we're afraid that it's going to smooth the silver, but these other substances, we're not afraid. Tiny nesser b'chol aser. And yet we have a second brisa which says that those substances are forbidden, right? So one brisa says you could use sand to rub silver. One says you cannot use sand to rub silver. What's going on? Why is one say you can? One say you can't. So the Gemara tries saying, what my la mahakam you know what they're arguing about? They're arguing like this. The Marsabina Maisa. One holds that you need to do an action to the sand in order to remove it from its muksa status, and that's why it's saying you can't use sand. Not because it does something to the silver, but you can't do sand because sand is muksa. Sand is typically muksa. Umar savar lobina maisa. One says you don't require an act, and therefore all you have to do is think about it, and that's why you're allowed to use sand. So now we're trying to say this machlokas about thought versus action really goes to the Tanaim, and it's found in this brisa. Again, the reason that and why it's a contradiction in the brisa is one says you can use sand to shine your silver, one says you cannot. It must be their debate is about whether or not sand you need to do an action to the sand to take it out of the status of muksa. Gemara says no. Maybe they're not arguing about this. Maybe everyone agrees. All you need is thought. V'lo but so then why does one say that it's forbidden? Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon. This goes back to another place where Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon have their debate. Rabbi Yehuda, Davar Shem Eskavein Aser. Rabbi Shimon, Davar Shem Eskavein Mutter. So what is this? That basically we have machlokas generally about Davar Shem Eskavein. If I do something, even though it's not my intention. What are we referring to over here? So over here is sand. The assumption was that sand does not cause the item to become smooth. There is an Isser Daraisa of smoothing an item, okay, of making something smooth on Shabbos, and making something smooth. So the Gemara now is telling us sand actually makes the silver smooth. It makes the silver smooth. And therefore, the opinion that says it could make it could make the silver smooth, the silver item smooth. So the one who says it's forbidden is saying, since it could make the item smooth, even though it's not my intention, it's going to be asur. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says, Davar Shem Eskavein Aser. The opinion who says I'm allowed to do it is Rav Shimon, who says Davar Shem Eskavein is mutter. Yeah? With me still? Yeah? Okay. Gemara says, my kimtel hadashari. So you want to tell me, the one who says it's permitted is Rav Shimon. Ema Seifa, Rav Shimon again, who holds Davar Shem Eskavein is mutter. Wait, then what about the end of the brisa? Avalo yachav em sa'aro. You're not allowed to rub your hair with it. Vi Rav Shimon mishari kashari. If it's Rav Shimon, then it should be allowed. In other words, when you rub your hair, there's a concern that hair is going to be pulled out, right? So why does the brisa say that Rav Shimon is saying, the end of the brisa says, the brisa that said you're allowed to rub silver, right, says you're not allowed to rub your hair. wait, according to Rav Shimon, I should be allowed to rub my hair because it's even though if it might happen, it's mutter, it's down. We see this explicitly from Rav Shimon. Nazir chofef umefasfes avalosorik. A nazir is allowed to rub their hair as long as they don't separate the hairs by their hand. Okay, he's allowed to rub their hair, as long as he doesn't comb his hair. So a nazir, right, who can't pull out hair, is allowed to rub their hair with sand. So the Gemara they can't be Rav Shimon. The Gemara says Ella ha v'ha Rabbi Yehuda. Rather, it must be it's both Rabbi Yehuda. Trade tonight, leave it to Rabbi Yehuda, and both these opinions are going to Rabbi Yehuda. Again, Rabbi Yehuda says Davar Shemiskavin is aser. Hi Tana, leave it to Rabbi Yehuda. Savar Garir. The opinion who says that it's forbidden holds that sand causes silver to get smooth, and therefore even if it's not your intention, Davar Shemiskavin is aser. Vaitana, leave it to Rabbi Yehuda. Savar Lo Garir. And the Tana who says that it's permitted holds that sand does not cause it to get smooth, and therefore he allows it. So now the Gemara asks further, my Kim to Rabbi Yehuda, you want to tell me that this brisa is Rabbi Yehuda, Ema Seifa. What about the ends of this brisa, which says V'panav yadav v'raglav mutter? You're allowed to use sand on your hands, face, and feet. Hama avet seir. But using sand on your hand, face, and feet, you're going to pull out hair. And again, Davar Shemiskavin, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is aser. The Gemara says, either we're talking about a minor, we're talking about a woman, or we're talking about a eunuch, someone who doesn't grow hair. All these people don't have facial hair, and that's where Yehuda says it is mutter because the person does not have hair, and therefore, even though I'm rubbing sand, it's not going to pull out the hair. Okay, what time is it? We have a minute? A minute. Okay, let's see. So we'll go a tiny bit further in Rav Dessler. Rav Dessler was talking about reward in this world. So he asked a very fundamental question. The question is, and that is the passage of Ahayim Shmoa. We just this? Sorry, I'm teaching this in Shabbos morning, so I always get confused. Okay, and that is the passage of Ahayim Shmoa. We did this? We did? Yeah. We talked about the expense account? No, I don't think we did this. Okay, so fine. But I said we're going to talk about this. So it's a passage of Ahayim Shmoa. So basically, we have the passage of Ahayim Shmoa basically talks about the fact that there is reward in this world. We just said there's no reward in this world. You can't have reward in this world. It's like monopoly money. And yet we have the passage of Ahayim Shmoa which says there is reward in this world. So very, very briefly. And we have to unpack this a lot more. We'll do that tomorrow, God willing. But basically, it says like this. Imagine. It's not the analogy used, but imagine you work for a business. They fly out to LA and you go to take care of a deal, and you spend a week there, and you close the deal. Come back home, and you go to the boss. You say, "Okay, I need my commission. 10%. I have my commission for closing deals. This is pay you? Are you kidding me? I flew you out to LA. You know how expensive that is? And then I put you up in a hotel. You know how expensive that is? And then you got a car. You know how expensive that is? And then you had to get kosher food in LA. You know, really, really expensive that is, right? You got like thousands upon thousands of dollars. I'm not going to pay you, right? And what do you do if your boss says that? You leave the job because he's an idiot. He's a fool, right? Those are called expenses. That's your expense account as opposed to payments. He says whenever the Torah talks about reward, the Rambam says it's not talking about reward. What it is expenses. The Hayim Shema Tishma is supposed to say the reward, world to come. There's absolutely no reward in the world to come. The only thing that is possible, even that we're going to qualify, the only thing that's possible in this world is expenses. Hashem says, if you do a mitzvah, schar mitzvah. If you do mitzvahs, I'm going to enable you to do mitzvahs. I'm going to pave the way for more mitzvahs. I'm going to cover your expenses. I'm going to give you the wherewithal to do more mitzvahs, but it's not reward. It's not reward. Reward is for the world to come. The only material benefits that are spoken about in the Torah, like we're going to have next week's parsha, says, if you listen to my mitzvahs, that is all the expense account and not the reward account, not the payment account. We have more to say about this. We'll come back to it next week. Have a good day.